Now back to Just Energy Radio with Dr. Rita Louise.
Hello, and welcome back to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for staying tuned to the second hour of the show, because in this hour, we're going to be talking about extraterrestrials in the Bible. But don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com and the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. So it's a new year, and if you have been looking to start a new career, perhaps you'd like to study to become a medical intuitive counselor, or energy medicine practitioner. And you can do that from the comfort of your own home at Applied Energetics Institute. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. Check out the programs that I offer. It might be right for you. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about Michael. We're running a little behind in this hour and get him on the air because I think we're going to have a lot of fun. Reverend Michael Carter is an ordained interfaith minister and received his BA degree in letters from the College of New Rochelle, where he graduated cum laude. He received his master's in divinity degree from Union Theological Seminary in New York City. He has served as a staff chaplain at Lenox Hill Hospital, Beth Israel Hospital, Beth Israel Cancer Center, Methodist Hospital, and New York Hospital, Queens, while residing in New York. So he is the author of the book, Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Reverend Michael Carter. Hey, Michael.
Hey, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
I'm okay. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too. I mean, I have to tell you, I guess you had emailed me, or I don't know how we originally connected, about you coming on the show with your book, and it sounded interesting. And then I was on Amazon flipping through, looking for interesting titles that were being released, and I saw your book, and I'm like, hey, I got to get this guy on. And you were like, I'm already scheduled. And I was like, oh, my God.
I remember that.
I was like, oopsie.
Oh,
anyway.
Okay. I'm just glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. So, I always like to kind of get a little intro,
Sure.
from a new guest, and then once you've been on, then we just get into the dirt. But you're an interfaith minister, but how did you get started studying and writing about UFOs?
Wow. Well, I was very heavy into metaphysics when I first moved to New York City. I lived there almost 30 years. I'm from Baltimore originally. And I don't know, I knew as a kid that I wanted to be a priest, actually. And I just knew that I would always be talking to people, delivering a message, if you will. So I actually, in my studies in metaphysics, opening me up to, just higher consciousness, those types of things. And I started having these visitations, if you will. And it was interesting because when I had gone to seminary, a lot of the things they wanted me to read, I had already read in my leisure time. Other people read novels. I'm reading church history and systematic theology, those kinds of things. And I was just having, as I'd say in the book, my first encounter outside of being a child was December 28th, 1989.
Well, and we'll get into that in more detail.
Yeah. But that's how I got. That's how the journey began. My study in the metaphysics and comparative religion.
And I might be getting ahead of myself as we have this story unfold. But it seems that a book on alien scriptures and extraterrestrials in the Bible is kind of a contradiction for someone who's a religious kind of guy.
Well, I'm not religious.
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah. And of course, listen, but it's really not. I mean, first of all, there have been several books written back in the day. My friend and colleague, Dr. Barry Downing, wrote a book back in 1968 called The Bible and Flying Saucers. In the early 50s, Morris K. Jessup, who died under mysterious circumstances, wrote a book on UFOs in the Bible, and we have some female energy in the genre because Virginia Brasington wrote a book called UFOs in the Bible, and so they were people who they were pioneers. I got into it after I had my experiences because it just opened me up, and just studying other civilizations and all these stories of people coming down from the sky and teaching civilization or creating civilization, and it was just universal. And so for me, it's not a contradiction. It's almost like when people used to say religion and science are distant cousins who never really speak to each other. I find that in the 21st century, they have to speak to each other, and they've been speaking to each other, and we really need to listen, because you need one. One does not preclude the other, at least not in my mind.
But it seems, and I'm just kind of taking the, straight and narrow path here for a second.
Yes.
That when we talk about the Bible, we're talking about God, and God's over there on his cloud in heaven behind the pearly gates. You know what I mean? We all have that image.
We do. But I'll tell you how times have changed. When I first started going on a lecture circuit and talking about this 15, 20 years ago, now I never mentioned my own experiences, but our more fundamentalist or orthodox brothers and sisters were not even talking about it. Now you have authors like Timothy Daly writing a book called The Millennial Deception, Angels, Aliens, and the Antichrist. Chuck Missler and Mark Eastman, they wrote a book called Alien Encounters, The Secret Behind the UFO Phenomenon. Now, the point I'm trying to make is this. These are conservative Christian folk, and they're talking about it. Now, granted, they're saying, yes, now there are extraterrestrials, but they're from the devil. They're demonic. Okay, we can roll with that. At least you're talking about it.
Yeah,
but
okay.
My more liberal colleagues, they're not talking about it at all. And so, we need other voices so that those voices don't dominate the conversation. I find it very xenophobic, very myopic. It's like what we do with human beings. A whole race of people is bad. Well, we're doing the same thing, I think, with the different races that are coming here. All the aliens are bad. Or what do they want? Well, which ones are you talking about? And we get a mixed message in the genre from the government because the government has to screen. And, of course, if Spielberg makes a movie, whether it's E.T. or Close Encounters or Dark Skies or what have you, there's going to be feedback from the powers that be, but it's kind of a mixed message. But most of the things that we see now, the aliens are the bad guys or bad girls, whatever you want to call it. And that's how people get conditioned. And I think there has to be more discernment is all I'm trying to say. But no, we have conservative Christians talking about extraterrestrial life. They're just saying it's demonic. But at least they're in the at least there's a conversation.
Well, it's all demonic.
Yeah. It's all Greek to me. It's all demonic to me.
So I'm going to share this story real quick. So I was at the 60th anniversary of the crash at Roswell, and I was helping Jerry Pippin in his booth. And he asked me if I wanted to come because he had never actually had a booth at a show where you sell stuff. And so, and I have a lot of trade show experience. And he goes, you can come, you can do readings in the booth, just help me out. And I'm like, hey, cool, 60th anniversary. This is sweet. And then I was told that I couldn't do readings in the booth because they could have UFOs, but you can't have psychic people because that's devil stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, really?
Yeah. Listen, I live in the buckle of the Bible Belt. Okay, I live in the mountains.
Hey, I live in Texas, so
Western North Carolina. Yeah, and it's just that kind of culture. It's everybody's Baptist, and if you're not Baptist, then there's a serious problem. And I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, so Billy Graham said that we were heretics and devil worshippers, and he has a right to his opinion. But it's just this kind of closed-minded. Difference makes people afraid. What are you going to do?
Well, and it's about something that they don't really know, and so they don't know what to do with it. And I think it's an interesting point that you bring up, that we are being programmed and conditioned that, the extraterrestrials are all bad, or in some of the genres, because if you watch like Star Trek, they're not all bad, or Star Wars, they're not all bad. They got Wookiees and, and then there's Jabba the Hutt, and he's not, he's kind of bad, but not like really bad.
It's a mixed message. But I do think, and I guess is the glass empty or half full? If you take a poll or you read polls, whether it's here, Europe, and Africa, wherever you are on the planet, most people, most countries, their citizens say, yeah, we've been visited. We can get over it. We want to know. We know that we're being lied to. You just saw what happened with one of the more open societies around this subject. What was it, 10 days ago? Mexico released some of the artwork that they had from the Mayans that clearly show aircraft drawn on rocks and stones. And people are they're hungry for this stuff. And, the world's not going to collapse. The way we live in the world will change, obviously. There'll be a lot of changes made, but I think we're headed towards disclosure. It's either that or there's going to be, well, there probably already has been, but there's going to be a sighting that you just can't explain away. Mm-hmm. We could argue that they already have been, and that would be true. But there's going to be something where we just can't explain away. I think that the United States has a lot more to lose, if that's the word, because we've lied to the public and signed treaties with folk, and we would have to explain why would we do that. But it seems that the United Kingdom, France to a degree, obviously Mexico, Australia, these folk have open, honest conversations that we're not alone.
Well, the part that I find interesting is that it's really only in the Western world that you find this literal brainwashing regarding the UFO phenomena. Because when you look in India or China or any of the indigenous cultures, I'm going to say indigenous cultures, because there are the Mayans who clearly talk about, I'm going to say extraterrestrial sky people, until the Spanish got there and brainwashed them with Christianity.
Yeah, I think it may be a little more complicated than that, but I feel that, listen, governments lie, okay? That's what governments do. And there may be some secrets that maybe I don't need to know about or I don't want to know about. And we're a superpower, and right now we're still the most powerful country on the planet. And so we get to call a lot of shots, and we have a lot to be accountable for. I can understand all of that, but, people have been contacted. Mm-hmm. And the government knows this. Our government knows this, and it's been in cahoots with certain species or races, and so you got to answer for that. People have lost their lives. People have been threatened. National security oaths, these types of things, and so how Dr. King was right. No lie lives forever. And I think that this is crumbling, and we live in an exciting time for many reasons. What's the old Chinese proverb? People say it's a curse. May you live in interesting times. Well, we certainly do, not just in the United States, but on planet Earth at this time. And I think it's pivotal. The old ways of doing things just don't work anymore. There's a different consciousness, if you will. And the governments are going to have to get on board, or not.
But I think that the American, and not just the American people, I think the people are waking up enough that they're looking at what's being said and what they're being told and going, bull. And how much are you going to take of that before you say, it's enough's enough?
Exactly. I mean, 15 years ago, I couldn't even say some of the things I thought I couldn't. Now I'm out of the closet. I wrote, ancient aliens, and my publicist, Mark Getty, is trying to get me on the UFO circuit and what have you, and no one's batting an eye. I'm a minister. My denomination is it's known for being very left-brained. There's very intellectual. There's a joke about Unitarian Universalists. Two Unitarian Universalists are walking down the street. They see a sign. The first sign says heaven. The second sign says discussion about heaven. Well, they go to the discussion. Okay, so we're God's frozen people, if you will. But I have people at the end of the service, they'll come up to me and say, you know what, I just saw you on TV yesterday, last night, talking about the Bible and UFOs. And they don't bat an eye. Well, probably 15, 20 years ago, that would not work at all.
Hey, Michael?
Yes.
Can we get you to hang up, and were you going to call him back, Joe, or did you want him to call back in?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have a great message, and we're not hearing it.
Okay. I'll call you right back.
So when we get him back on the air, we're going to talk to him a little bit about his experience, which I think will be pretty interesting because it seems like he has a really good perspective or a different perspective on life. So I'm going to be curious to hear what that's about.
Yes, I'm back. Can you hear me?
Oh, much better, much better.
Okay.
So I'm just going to kind of shift gears because,
Sure.
finite time and, I think we could talk for hours.
No question.
So, you mentioned that you've had, some experiences, and I love that term, and I just heard that term, experiencer. Actually, I had Kathleen Martin and Denise Stoner on, and that was the first time I heard that term. And so for the listeners, what is an experiencer and what did you experience?
Okay. I'm very intentional. I was talking to a good friend of mine today, the one I mentioned to you right before the show, Melissa Krieger, and we were talking about this same thing. She's the one who told me you were fearless. And I call it an experience. I don't feel like I was abducted against my will or abused or, I don't, that hasn't been my experience. I try to refer to these beings as visitors, even though they've probably been here, before we were here. I mean, obviously they have been. It takes away the otherness of it, because as humans we do that to each other. It's not to say they're human. I mean, they're beings. They're living beings with families and with children and with kids. Those types of things. So that's why I say that I experienced December 28th, 1989. Came back from seeing the pyramids at Chichen Itza and Tulum on the Yucatan Peninsula. Up to this point, I'm not a Trekkie. I didn't watch Star Trek. I don't watch Star Trek. There was a time I didn't even believe in UFOs. And so I come home, go visit a friend, go to a party. I told him I wasn't going to go, but I went. I stayed about 90 minutes, didn't drink anything, didn't imbibe anything. And I came home, and I got up in the middle of the night. I don't even know why, because I didn't go to the bathroom or anything. Maybe I just sensed it. And there was a being in my room. My room was lit up like Times Square with this blue, cobalt blue light. And there was a being on the edge of my bed looking at me, and I looked at it. And we just kind of looked at each other, and my heart was coming out of my chest. The being was not gray, was chalk white, had the pear-shaped head with the Ray-Ban kind of wraparound eyes, had this tight-fitting, shiny jumpsuit on, for lack of a better word, really form-fitting. And I pulled the covers up over my head. And I heard this rushing, this wind like whoosh, this whirling, and I felt like I was outside. Now remember, this is December. And I pulled the cover back down to see, it was almost unbelievable. Am I outside? We lived on the 15th floor then, on West 81st Street between Columbus and Central Park West. And when I pulled the covers down, I was back in, well, I wouldn't even say back. I was in my home. It was like nothing ever happened.
Did you experience any missing time, or did you even think to look for missing time?
No, I did not experience any missing time, but I started having visits from these folk for about 6 to 8 months, every full and new moon. There were times, and we didn't talk like you and I are talking. They talked to me in pictures. They would show me things in my head. Now, there were times when I remember once I had a hypodermic needle stuck behind my head. Twice, once in the crown of my head. I mean, I've had things like that happen, which obviously were uncomfortable and very frightening. As I say in the book, I went to a psychiatrist because obviously I thought that, I was really losing it. Bud Hopkins regressed me, the late Gene Mundy, another wonderful individual, and these things were very real. Now, I had similar stuff as a kid, but not like this, not like there were beings in my room. I did not have, those were traumatic things, but they weren't traumatic like I was abused or I had sperm taken or, women having, I didn't have any of that, not to my recollection. And so, if anything, I consider these beings my friends. Now, the last encounter I had, because this went on from 89 for several years, and then it stopped for a while. I had to get on with life, I guess. It was the greatest thing that happened to me outside of the birth of my daughter, but I had to live life. I had to get up and go to work and make a living, but I was reading voraciously, I was studying, I was in a support group. And then years went by, and I didn't hear from them. Maybe in a dream every once in a while, no postcards, no letters. And then, July 4th of last year, I had a blood clot last year that was as long as my leg, and I didn't even know what it was. I thought I had pulled a muscle. The pain was excruciating. To make a long story short, so I was on Coumadin till this last September. I'm injecting myself in my stomach. The doctors are giving me something called an Enoxaparin. At 9:49 p.m. on July 4th, I had a visit. And the being it was my little being with the head, and the jumpsuit. I'm sure they changed clothes, but this was almost identical. And they shot this ray it was in the back, because I was lying on my stomach. And when I turned around, I saw it. And then they just disappeared. They're like little molecules. They just separated right in front of me. And the next day, my blood clot, it was just gone. The swelling went down, the whole bit. Of course, I didn't have the presence of mind to look at my leg, but of course I told my wife about it and my daughter, because they saw how huge it was. I'm a very thin man, but my leg was swollen up like LeBron James from this clot, and it could have killed me, but it was gone. I went to the doctor. Of course, I didn't tell them the story I'm telling you, and they were a little... it's hard for them to wrap their mind around. How did this happen? What did you do? And I said to them, aren't you happy? Aren't you happy that this is gone? And then they were like, yeah, we just don't know how. It was just unusual. that's a long, convoluted way of saying, so those are my experiences. Now, there are brothers and sisters who have been abducted and have had painful things done and what have you, and that's the word they choose to use, and, that's what makes America great. You can say what you need to say. It just wasn't my experience.
So I kind of get the impression that you're kind of a sensitive guy. So once you got past that initial, oh my God, there's an alien sitting on my bed energy. I mean, did they, I like to say, did they have good vibes? Did they have good mojo? I mean, they were giving you pictures, but I would assume that there would be, you would experience some kind of energy or feeling from them, so what did their energy feel like?
I can't tell you that. All I can tell you is that my energy was the one that changed. My interest has always been, and this will get to your question, I'm not into the nuts and bolts of this phenomenon. I don't care how they fly. I'm not like the government trying to back engineer and fiber optics and making drones and cell phones and all these microchips. I mean, it's lovely. It makes my life a little easier. I was always interested in spiritually what would be the results of contact between human beings and human beings, but someone from a higher intelligence. And I mean, just because someone drives around in a spaceship doesn't mean they're smarter than you on one level. But it accelerated my spiritual growth. In what ways? I'm glad you asked. I just had more of a feeling, not just an intellectual feeling, but a feeling of unity. The law of one, if I can use that there's just no separation. What I do to you really does affect me. What I do to the earth really does affect me. And it's not just some intellectual platitude. And I try to live that out. I didn't have that kind of consciousness at first, not as deeply as I did. I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to live my life and make a living and, very modest. And I don't have any grandiose aspirations. I don't have any messianic aspirations, but I got it that either we will, like Dr. King said, we'll live together as brothers and sisters, or we'll perish together as fools. Now, you don't have to have a being come from another dimension or another planet to get you there. You don't have to have that. But this is what happened to me. And of course, millions of people like me who are delivering the same type of message. But it just changed me so much more. I'm a much more gentler person. I'm a much more intuitive person. I'm a much more insightful person. I work at that. I meditate. I have a prayer life. I try to be open and look at my own stuff and be responsible for my life. Again, you can probably go to a good therapist, and maybe some people can put that in motion. But for me, and I don't know why me, I know what other psychics have told me why they've come to me, but I'm just so much into unity. That doesn't mean we don't have racial problems or homophobes or, we got a lot of people want to bomb people back to the Stone Age. It doesn't make life like a Mary Poppins movie, but it does give me another perspective on how to be the change I want to see in the world, and to get most important for me is to be able to get along with people who maybe I don't have the same politics, or maybe they're Tea Party and I'm not, or maybe they like Obama and I don't. I'm just using those as examples. How I can still interact. We don't have to think alike to love alike. Is basically what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think when you start getting into things like even the concept of do UFOs exist or not exist, you start wrangling into the area of beliefs, and my beliefs are my beliefs and your beliefs are your beliefs. And we need to be able to be respectful of what we believe. Yes.
And it's just so easy to get polarized. And so that's where I am, and I can only speak for Michael, and every day is a journey. I realize that, I get up in the morning, I have a daughter, my wife and I have ups and downs, and we're trying to reconcile. I mean, I'm the minister of a church. I'm a relatively healthy person. I have a lot to be thankful for, and I happen to have had people from another world on many occasions come to visit me and to walk a journey with me. But I still get up in the morning and put one foot in front of the other and go about my day, just like we all try to do.
Well, I never met an alien being from another dimension that I didn't like.
I know some of my best friends are from other planets. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm just kind of looking at the clock, and we were going to talk a bit about aliens in the Bible.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah.
so, I think I'm just going to kind of cut to the chase here a little bit.
Yes.
And ask you, to you, which is your favorite example, or the example that stands out to you the most that comes out of the Bible that supports the notion of extraterrestrials in antiquity?
Wow, great question. There are a few. I'll go to two. One in the First Testament. We call it the Old Testament, but it makes our Jewish brothers and sisters kind of PO'd because it's not old. It's the First Testament, but we call it the Old Testament. Is the story with Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, and they are following what they call the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. What's significant about that is in the Exodus story is simply that first of all, there's no Jewish religion until the Exodus, and this object is flying intelligently, and they are following it. And it looks like a pillar of cloud by day. A lot of UFO sightings do. Sometimes there's a lot of cloud cover or cloud camouflage, and at night it's a pillar of fire by night, which means it's glowing. It stops when they camp, and when they get up the next day, it moves on and they follow it. So clearly, this is at least it's an unidentified flying object, but it's intelligent. It stops, it starts, that type of thing. The other story that intrigues me is, of course, the Christmas story. And here we have the wise men following a star, and the star leads them to, I'm just giving the truncated version, obviously, to the manger where possibly a hybrid by the name of Yeshua ben Yosef, who in Greek is named Jesus, is being born. And this star shines a light down on the manger. Now, we know that stars don't do that, because if stars move like that, the whole gravitational pull of the Earth would be affected. And you talk about weather problems and tsunamis and those types of things, we'd really have some problems if a star decided to do that. But if we take it that these brothers and sisters, our ancestors, are just trying to tell us what they saw in the vernacular, using the vernacular and the nomenclature of their times, this special birth, perhaps that these wise men from the East are astrologers or astronomers, and this is the moment in history they've been waiting for, and they follow this star, and they see the baby, who goes on to be one of the greatest prophets this planet has ever known. So those two stand out. I mean, there's Ezekiel, of course, and that story there. There's also the story of Jesus after the crucifixion going up in a cloud, and the messengers, who we call angels, of course it means angelos in Greek is messenger, saying, why are you staring? The same Jesus who left you will come back. And he leaves on a cloud. And for me, that's like UFO. We went from saying unidentified flying object to UFO. It's simpler. By this time, thousands of years have passed since the Exodus story, and instead of saying the pillar of cloud by day, the pillar of fire by night, they just say the cloud. Jesus leaves us on a cloud. In between that time, they talked about flying chariots. But clearly, there are things in the sky. And those stories were the ones that really got me going into. There are other stories. I mean, I think that Yahweh is an astronaut. I'm not saying there is no God, and of course I'm free to say that if that's what I believe, but that's not what I believe. But he's just too human. He gets angry. He wants to drown everybody and start all over again. He has people going into the promised land with the Philistines, killing men, women, and children. That doesn't sound like a God I want to worship. It does sound like someone who needs anger management and wants his own tribe. There are other gods. He says, you should have no other gods before me. Well, you don't have to say that unless there are other gods, i.e. other people, other beings from other worlds. The other thing that drew me to the extraterrestrial link to the Bible is in the book of Isaiah, chapter 40, verse 22. It reads, "It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain." I was taught that we thought the world was flat until Columbus. Here we have someone writing 5,000 years ago saying that he sits above the circle of the earth. How did they know 5,000 years ago that the earth was a sphere? Those were kind of the clues. When I asked my Old Testament professor about it, she didn't BS me. She said, "I don't know." There's talk about the Pleiades and the Orion star systems in the First Testament. Again, it begs the question: how do people 5,000 years ago know about the Pleiades? These were the things in the book of Amos, chapter 5, verse 8. The question is, who made the Pleiades and Orion? Who turns deep darkness into dawn and darkens day into night? Well, again, Pleiades and Orion. How did they know about those star systems? So those were some of the things that got me to thinking about maybe beings from another world. The first chapter of Zechariah, he talks about he meets two angels, and they talk about we have to go patrol the earth. The King James Version uses the word patrol. The Hebrew version says we have roamed the earth and have found the earth dwelling in tranquility. So they're patrolling the earth in these chariots. Interestingly enough, but also I just got a text from my publicist, Mark Eddy, who says, don't forget to tell them that Jesus, of course, says, in my Father's house I have many mansions. And I look at that verse as that in the galaxy, there are just many other life forms. There are many other civilizations. This universe is big enough for, is teeming with life, and it's big enough for more than just the human beings. In the movie Contact, Jodie Foster has a wonderful line. She says, if this is all there is, talking about us human beings and Earth, it seems like an awful waste of space. I love that line.
Yeah, that's a great one. I mean, one of the things that I love that you bring to the table that I never would have looked for. I mean, I know that the Old Testament is full of stories about extraterrestrials. And if you just read the Bible with that viewpoint, it just makes so much more sense. The narrative just makes so much more sense. And I have to tell you, if I ever had the opportunity to go meet anybody, from time or space that you could go spend an hour with or something, it would be Moses. It would totally be Moses, because then he could tell you what happened on the mountain.
Yeah, I mean,
that would be so cool.
I mean, he has a lot. He would have a lot to say. I mean, now, the Bible is used for many things. At one time, it was used to to validate slavery, and of course it's been used to oppress GBLT.
Oh, well, wait a minute. Just stop there one second.
You know.
Actually, the comment that I was starting to make that I didn't finish was, I never knew that there were references to extraterrestrials in the New Testament. So that was the first part that I didn't finish. But, you said about validating slavery. I mean, one of the things that was interesting, and I wrote a note here, hang on, that you mentioned that God tells Moses how much to charge for male slaves.
Yes,
and
in the book of Leviticus, yes.
And the part that I find very interesting, and I'm just going to throw this at you because I'd like to hear your take on this. I find it interesting that if there is this group of people who were slaves and they're leaving captivity, then why would they have slaves? And why would they create laws for dealing with slaves and say that their slaves have to be able to rest on the seventh day just like them? It's like, wait a minute. So slaves have slaves? Maybe they really weren't slaves.
Well, I won't go that far. I think the historicity is there that they were slaves. But, it doesn't, when you look at history, most of the oppressed people wind up becoming oppressors. It's like people who were abused as a child, sometimes they wind up being abusers. So that's kind of human nature. The thing about chattel slavery in this country, as opposed to what we read in the Bible, is that slaves were spoils of war. Okay, people raped and pillaged, and, it was my right to capture you. I mean, because you were part of the spoils of war. The difference here is that people of color were not viewed as human beings. And that's the difference. Now, I could follow your train of thought if you had said, and I've said this to, and we're getting off the subject a little, to more people who are more Afrocentric. Egyptians were not blonde, blue-eyed. They were folk of color. Hebrews in that time, I've been to the Middle East, there were no blonde, blue-eyed people there. So now you could say there was one person of color, one group of color enslaving another group, another people of color. That's the way I would look at that, because these people are brown. And put it like this: if Moses got on a bus in Alabama in 1950, he'd have to sit in the back. Okay? If Jesus was walking down the street in 1947 in Texas, he'd be on the back of the bus. These are people of color we're talking about. But as far as slaves owning slaves, things like that, well, that's human nature. Somebody's got to be on top. And
you would think that they would be adverse to the whole mentality of, well, do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing.
What would make you think that? Point. Give me something in history where that has happened. We could argue that some Palestinians may argue that Jews went through the Holocaust, but the way I'm being treated in Israel right now, I'm not being treated well, and they should know better. They were treated. Hitler didn't give them a free ride. So I don't see anything in human history that, now, avatars and saints have come down and said, whether it's Buddha or Krishna or whoever, that's not the way we want to treat one another. But I look at human history and I see the very people who were oppressed can turn around and wind up being the oppressors. It's just, I don't know, maybe it's something, a gene or something in us, but I don't see the opposite of that. I would like to see that.
Well, that's the part that makes me laugh. I'm a student of mythology, metaphysics and mythology. And it's very interesting because you read the story, the narratives that come out of us from the mythological record, and the only thing that happens is the gods are fighting with each other and plotting against each other and raping the women. They're awful. They're just awful.
Yeah. And that's why.
And then they turn around and give us a bunch of laws to live by, and they get mad when we don't follow them.
Isn't that very human in a lot of ways?
No,
that's what we do. And back then, the gods were fighting each other. If you read the Hindu Mahabharata, they're talking about these gods flying around in their vehicles called vimanas. They're flying machines, and they're using things that we would probably say were nuclear weapons. So, that's another thing with Yahweh. I mean, his temper tantrums, these types of things. And again, for me, that doesn't mean there isn't some intelligence in that one would call it creation or creator. The Palladians call it this energy creation, but it's not an anthropomorphic being. But that's why we have people come down, and well, at least in early part of history, trying to say, "Hey, let me show you a better way to live."
So, and I get that with Jesus, using Jesus as
Buddha, Krishna.
Well, I'm sticking with the Bible.
Oh, there's a whole world out there, but let's.
Well, I know, but this is where it gets very interesting to me because I'm a very good Christian Jew. If that makes actually, I'm nothing, but that's
Jesus
how I was brought up.
He was a Jew, so yeah, I hear you.
But anyway.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Jesus was a Jew. He wasn't a Christian. Paul started Christianity.
Yeah. But I'm just kind of trying to keep this encapsulated because I think this is a really interesting viewpoint. Not going into areas where like they already believe in extraterrestrials. Because to me the Bible is about God over there, and us as humans, and you throw in this extraterrestrial concept into it. So is God an extraterrestrial? And then what happens to the Bible if God of the Bible is an extraterrestrial? Then what happens to the Bible? It loses the I can't think of the sacredness.
There's a wonderful book.
Oh, it's a wonderful book. It's a good read.
There's a wonderful book. It's a Wonderful Life. It's a wonderful book. Its title, I guess you have to Google it. I'm trying to look now because I do have it in my library. But it's called "Does God Drive a Flying Saucer?" There are two. Oh, here it is. He wrote two books. Does God Drive a Flying Saucer? And the second book is called "Is God Supernatural?" The 4,000-year-old misunderstanding. It's by an author by the name of R as in Robert, L as in Larry, Dione, Dione. You can get it in paperback. He goes through all of that. I know people who say that God is an extraterrestrial. Who knows?
Well, and I don't mean like the big G God, that creator God, not that one. I concede, we don't know, not that one. I'm talking about Yahweh or Jehovah. Or
I think you read the book. I argue in the book that he is one of many gods, but he was an extraterrestrial. The other question becomes this, and obviously we won't tackle this tonight, but the other question is technology, if we find out that the so-called miracles are from technology, and there's really no such thing as supernatural, it's just laws of creation that we don't understand. I think that's the bigger question, even though I framed it as a comment. I'm sorry. But yeah, does it take away if I feed 5,000 people, but I do it with technology as opposed to, if I'm walking on water, if my daddy is E.T. and my mama isn't, then that means I'm not fully human. So I can turn water into wine. I can walk on water. I can get up from the dead because I'm not human. Fully human, that is.
Well, the whole bread and fish thing, they didn't have a whole meal. They just had a nosh.
Well, I don't know. The little boy brought loaves and fishes. He brought his lunch. He knew Jesus was an all-day preacher. So he probably figured, I'm going to be out here all day. I need to bring some food. I mean, you know how these ministers and rabbis are. We know how to run our mouths.
Well, but they were Jewish, so, they just had a bite.
Yeah, I'll just take a couple of fish just to have something to nosh on.
It was just a nosh.
I'm going to be all day listening to this guy.
And then it cost you $10. It was free to get in, but it was $10 for that nosh. They didn't talk about how much it cost.
And
one of the other things that comes out of this whole question about God is the whole concept of the angels. And I'm just, all right. You know what? Cancel that question. I just need to have you come back on, and we can get into this whole theological thing because this is fun. But we only have 2 minutes before the music comes up. 1 minute before the music.
Let me tell people where they can get the book.
That's why I wanted to not go into that question.
Great minds think alike. They can get the book, Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. I think it's $4.99. It's like $9.79 on Amazon and Barnes and Nobles. You can go to my website, which is www.michaeljscarter.com. You can purchase it there. You can blog me. You can call me names. You can write nasty things if you choose to. I hope you don't, and I will respond. But again, Barnes and Nobles and Amazon.com. Nook, I think it's $4.99 as well. And just keep watching Ancient Aliens.
And so if they get the book from your website, do they come signed?
No, they don't. That's a good idea. I should talk to my publisher about that. No, they don't.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Just checking.
I'm sorry. But it's
so
still
you have been on Ancient Aliens? You're going to be on Ancient Aliens?
I've been on Ancient Aliens the last 2 seasons. I was on there initially a couple of years ago. I did an episode called Angels and Aliens. There's the angel word again. And Angels and Aliens in Sacred Places. And I taped some episodes back in September of this year. And, oh, God, I wish Mark was here now to tell me to remind me. But anyway, I'm on there.
Just keep your eyes out, everybody.
Yeah, I'm on there quite frequently. And History Channel, too. And
it's all good. And you should tell them that I'm totally cool, and I'm fearless, and they should just have me on.
Well, you definitely are fearless, and make sure you talk to Melissa. But you are fearless. It's been a pleasure. Let's do it again. Really, I know a lot of hosts say that, but let's do this again. I mean, we got a whole bunch to talk about.
I know.
Yes.
An hour wasn't enough. That's what they were saying in the chat room too. So.
Oh, well then, see, now the onus is on you.
We love you already, and we don't even hardly know you.
Well, that's probably why you do love me.
All right. I know the music's got to be coming up now, and so I'm going to say goodbye.
Oh, yeah. Well, not goodbye, just until we meet again. Till
next time. Till next.
Yes. Okay. Take care. God bless.
God bless you. That's Michael Carter. His book is Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible. His webpage is www.michaeljscarter.com. And next week, we will be speaking with a good friend, Ed Malkowski, about his new book, Paradise, the Ancient Catastrophe and the Rebuilding of a Nation. And so until next week, I'm Dr. Rita Louise. This is Just Energy Radio. Be blessed.
Join host Dr. Rita Louise each week at this time for Just Energy Radio.